This is absolutely exploding right now. And if what insiders are saying is even half true, then the entire league narrative just flipped overnight. Because just 2 minutes ago, a shocking claim surfaced online involving Angel Reese. And it's already sending shockwaves through social media, fan pages, and private locker room circles. According to a former teammate speaking anonymously, things behind the scenes were never as positive as fans were led to believe. The source claims there were constant tensions, silent arguments, and moments where everything felt like it was about to collapse at any second. But nobody ever spoke publicly about it. Until now. And the most explosive part? That same insider is allegedly exposing a hidden emotional breakdown inside the locker room, one that connects directly to the ongoing storm surrounding Caitlin Clark, a rivalry that fans thought was just media hype, but now is being described as something far deeper, far more personal, and far more uncomfortable than anyone expected. Reports suggest there were moments where emotions completely spilled over behind closed doors, with teammates allegedly breaking down, questioning loyalty, and even refusing to speak about certain players after games. Nothing was ever confirmed publicly, but whispers inside the league are now getting louder than ever. And here's where it gets even more intense. The same source claims that what fans saw on the court was only half the story, and that the real conflict wasn't about stats, fame, or performance. It was about respect, influence, and control inside the locker room. Social media is already divided. Some are calling it exposure. Others are calling it an attack. But one thing is clear. This story is no longer staying quiet. Because if this leak is real, then what actually happened inside that team isn't just drama. It's something the league may have been trying to bury for a long, long time. And in the next moment, the situation takes an even darker turn that no one saw coming. What makes this situation even more intense is how quickly the story started to spread once the claims hit social media. Within minutes, fan accounts began digging up old clips, old interviews, and even sideline reactions that nobody thought much about at the time, but now look completely different through this new lens. Every glance, on every pause, every awkward moment is suddenly being reinterpreted like it was part of a bigger hidden conflict. And at the center of all this renewed attention is Angel Reese, who now finds herself pulled into a narrative that is growing faster than she can respond to. Insiders claim the tension didn't appear overnight. They describe it as something that slowly built up over time. Small disagreements turning into silent distance, team chemistry slowly shifting, and certain conversations allegedly becoming impossible to have without conflict. But what really set social media on fire is the way fans started connecting this situation to Caitlin Clark. Even though there is no confirmed direct link between them in this specific claim. Still, online debates exploded instantly, with supporters on both sides arguing over influence, respect, and how narratives are shaped in women's basketball. Then came the emotional twist. A second alleged insider post began circulating, claiming that one former teammate was left visibly shaken during a private team moment, describing it as the first time they realized how deep the internal pressure really was. The post didn't name names directly, but fans immediately tried to decode every detail. That's when things escalated again, because now the conversation is no longer just about one player or one team. It's turning into a full-blown league-wide debate about locker room culture, leadership styles, and who is really setting the tone behind closed doors. And just as it seems like things might calm down for a second, a new alleged leak is about to surface, one that reportedly contains direct quotes from inside the locker room that could completely change how this entire story is understood. And this is where everything takes a sharp turn. Because just as the online debate was starting to spiral out of control, another alleged insider drop began circulating. And this one is far more specific, far more emotional, and far more damaging in tone. According to the post being shared across fan forums and private group chats, tensions inside the environment were not just occasional disagreements, but repeated emotional breakdown moments where communication allegedly completely broke down between certain players and leadership voices. Once again, your angel Reese is being placed at the center of the storm, not through official statements, but through anonymous claims that describe an environment filled with frustration, miscommunication, and growing emotional distance that supposedly reached a breaking point during the season. What's making this even more explosive is how these claims are being interpreted differently depending on who you ask. Supporters say it's exaggerated noise created to damage a rising star's reputation. Critics argue it's finally confirming what people inside already knew. And then the narrative shifts again when fans bring up Caitlin Clark, not because of any confirmed interaction in this leak, but because she has become the symbolic opposite in this entire conversation online. One side is using her as a comparison point for leadership and impact, while the other warns that the media is turning everything into a forced rivalry storyline. But here's where the emotional intensity peaks. One alleged message being shared claims that a teammate felt completely unheard during critical moments of the season, describing situations where frustration wasn't just tactical, but personal. The language being circulated is vague, but it's powerful enough to keep fueling the fire across every platform. And now the situation is no longer contained. Sports pages, commentary channels, and fan communities are all reacting at the same time, each adding their own interpretation, each making the story bigger than the last. But just when it feels like the narrative might stabilize for a moment, a final layer is about to emerge. And it doesn't just involve locker room tension anymore. It hints at a decision that may have permanently changed how the entire league views this situation moving forward. And this is the moment where the entire conversation stops being just online drama and starts turning into something much more serious in perception. Because now, the latest wave of claims suggests that what happened wasn't just emotional tension during the season. It may have actually influenced decisions behind the scenes that fans never saw coming. Once again, Angel Reese is being mentioned at the center of the storm, as anonymous posts continue describing an environment that allegedly became increasingly difficult to manage as the season progressed. According to these circulating claims, certain conversations inside the organization reportedly shifted from fixing chemistry to reevaluating direction entirely. And that's where things take a dramatic turn. Because instead of this being framed as a simple locker room disagreement, the narrative online is now evolving into something bigger. A supposed breaking point moment where trust inside the team allegedly reached its limit. Meanwhile, the name Caitlin Clark keeps getting pulled into the discussion across social platforms, not as part of confirmed events, but as a comparison point fueling heated arguments about leadership styles, influence, and who is shaping the league's future identity. The debate is no longer quiet. It's loud, emotional, and deeply divided. Then comes the most viral part of this new wave. An alleged internal reaction post claims that when news of roster decisions and long-term direction started becoming clearer inside the locker room, there was a visible emotional shift, described loosely as disappointment, frustration, and uncertainty about what comes next. But here's the twist that's keeping everyone locked in. Because none of this is officially confirmed, and yet the story continues to grow faster than any official denial or clarification can control. And now fans are asking the real question out loud. Was this ever just about chemistry? Or was it always heading toward an inevitable reset that no one publicly admitted until it was already too late? And just when it feels like the story is peaking, the final layer of this entire situation is about to drop. And it reportedly changes how this whole narrative will be remembered going forward. And this is where the story takes its most controversial turn yet. Because now, the latest wave of online claims is no longer just about locker room tension or emotional reactions. It's about consequences, timing, and what allegedly happened right after everything reached its breaking point. Once again, Angel Reese is being placed at the center of discussion, as circulating posts claim that internal frustration didn't just stay behind closed doors. It may have influenced how certain decisions were handled as the season moved toward its final stretch. According to these unverified accounts spreading across social platforms, there were moments where communication inside the team reportedly became so strained that even routine conversations were described as tense or emotionally loaded. Fans are now dissecting every old interview, every post-game comment, trying to find hidden meaning in what was once seen as normal. And while none of this has been officially confirmed, the internet is already running with it. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark continues to be dragged into the wider discussion, not because of direct involvement in these specific claims, but because she has become the central reference point in a much larger debate about leadership, impact, and influence in the league. Some fans argue she represents a new standard. Others say the comparison itself is unfair and forced. Either way, the conversation is only getting louder. But here's the part that changes the tone completely. One widely shared post claims that after internal frustrations reportedly peaked, there was a noticeable shift in how certain players interacted, described as colder, more distant, and less communicative than before. The wording is vague, but it's enough to keep the rumor mill spinning at full speed. And now, the biggest question hanging over everything is no longer about what happened during the season. It's about what those alleged behind-the-scenes moments actually triggered afterward. Because if even part of this narrative is true, then this wasn't just a temporary conflict. It may have been the beginning of a full reset that nobody publicly admitted until it was already done. And just when you think the full picture is finally in front of you, there's still one final reaction that's starting to surface, and it could completely flip how fans interpret everything that came before it. And just when the conversation seemed like it couldn't get any louder, a new layer suddenly enters the spotlight. And this one shifts the focus from rumors to reaction. Because now, attention is turning toward how former teammates and league voices are reportedly responding privately to everything being said online. Once again, Angel Reese remains the central name driving the debate, as social media continues resurfacing old clips, sideline moments, and post-game interviews, all being reinterpreted through this newly intensified narrative. What used to be seen as normal competitiveness is now being framed by some fans as signs of deeper internal friction. At the same time, Caitlin Clark is being pulled further into the broader discussion. Not because of any confirmed connection to these latest claims, but because her rise has become the contrast point in almost every major WNBA conversation online. Supporters highlight her influence and on-court control, while critics argue the comparison is being pushed too aggressively by fan-driven narratives. But here's where things get even more emotionally charged. An alleged reaction circulating online claims that one former teammate privately expressed shock at how quickly the situation escalated once it hit public platforms, describing it as nothing like what fans are seeing from the outside. The wording doesn't confirm or deny anything, but it adds fuel to both sides of the argument. And now the division is clearer than ever. One side insists this is a case of misunderstood dynamics being blown out of proportion by viral storytelling. The other side believes this is exactly what happens when internal tension finally becomes impossible to hide. But the most important part is still unfolding. Because now fans aren't just debating what happened during the season. They're questioning how much of it was already affecting decisions before anything ever went public. And just as that question starts to dominate every comment section, every thread, and every debate, a final wave of reaction is about to hit. One that reportedly involves direct emotional responses from people closest to the situation. And it may completely redefine how this entire story is remembered. And this is the point where the story shifts from online noise into something that feels far more personal and emotionally charged. Because now, the latest wave of reactions being shared across social platforms suggests that people closest to the situation are no longer staying silent, even if they're not speaking on record. Once again, Angel Reese remains at the center of the discussion as old clips, interviews, and sideline moments continue circulating at lightning speed. But what's different now is the tone of how fans are interpreting everything. It's no longer just about performance, it's about personality, pressure, and perception all colliding at once. At the same time, Caitlin Clark continues to be used as a contrasting reference point in nearly every debate. Not because of any confirmed involvement, but because she represents a different trajectory in the minds of many fans. One that is being used to frame discussions about leadership, impact, and team dynamics across the league. But here's where things intensify again. A widely shared alleged reaction claims that someone close to the environment described the aftermath of the season as emotionally exhausting behind closed doors, suggesting that the public version of events barely scratches the surface of what players experienced internally. The message doesn't provide details, but the emotional wording alone has been enough to reignite the entire debate. And now the conversation has fully split into two worlds. One world sees this as a classic case of locker room growing pains being exaggerated by viral storytelling and social media repetition. The other world believes this is exactly how real internal breakdowns usually look. Quiet at first, then suddenly unavoidable once the pressure builds too high. But the most explosive part of all this isn't what's already been said. It's what hasn't been officially addressed yet. Because despite all the viral claims, all the reactions, and all the heated debate, there has been no definitive clarification that settles the story either way. And that silence is exactly what keeps the narrative alive. Now, as the discussion continues to spread across every platform, one final question is starting to take over everything. Was this ever just about a season of basketball? Or was it the beginning of a much deeper shift inside the league that fans are only now starting to notice? And just as that question hangs in the air, the final call to the audience is about to land. And it's designed to push this debate even further. And now we reach the final moment, where this entire story stops being just about headlines and becomes a question directed straight at the audience watching it unfold. Because after all the alleged reactions, the viral debates, and the endless replays of old moments, the internet is still completely divided on what this situation really means. On one side, the supporters of Angel Reese argue that the narrative has been exaggerated, taken out of context, and amplified by social media cycles that thrive on controversy rather than truth. They point to her accomplishments, her competitiveness, and the pressure that comes with being one of the most talked about players in the league as reasons the situation is being misunderstood. On the other side, critics believe the constant reports, anonymous claims, and resurfaced clips are not random at all, but part of a larger pattern fans are only now starting to connect. And once again, every comparison circles back to Caitlin Clark, who has become the focal point of a much wider debate about leadership style, media attention, and how differently players are perceived in today's league environment. But here's the truth that no viral post can escape. None of the circulating claims have been officially confirmed, yet the conversation continues to grow as if they already are. And that gap between rumor and reality is exactly what's fueling the intensity right now. Because fans aren't just reacting anymore. They're investigating, arguing, rewatching, and building entire narratives out of fragments of information. And that's what makes this moment so powerful and so unpredictable. Now, the question is no longer about what was said online. It's about what people choose to believe. So here's where you come in. Do you think this is a case of misunderstood locker room dynamics being blown out of proportion by social media? Or do you believe there's more happening behind the scenes than the public will ever fully see? Just drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is far from over. And every opinion is adding fuel to a story that keeps evolving with every hour. And if you want the next update as soon as it breaks, because something tells us this isn't finished yet, then stay tuned. And just when everyone thought the situation had already peaked, there's one last ripple spreading through the conversation that refuses to die down. Because now, the focus shifts from what was said to what happens next in the aftermath of all this noise. Once again, Angel Reese remains the most talked about name in the entire debate, with fans still going back and forth over whether the narrative surrounding her is being shaped by reality, frustration, or pure online amplification. Now, every new comment section turns into a battlefield, with opinions clashing harder than ever before. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark continues to sit at the center of comparisons that have now expanded far beyond basketball itself. For some, she represents stability and control in a rapidly growing league. For others, she's become an unfair benchmark being used to frame every other storyline in women's basketball. But here's where the final twist of perception begins to form. Because as the debate continues online, more and more fans are starting to realize something important. None of the strongest claims in this entire discussion have been officially verified. And yet the emotional intensity behind them feels real enough that people are treating them like fact. And that's exactly what makes this situation so explosive. Not just what was said, but how fast it was believed. Because in today's digital world, a single anonymous post can turn into a full-scale narrative within minutes. And once that happens, it becomes almost impossible to separate emotion from evidence. And now, as reactions continue pouring in from every direction, one final thought is echoing across the entire conversation. This isn't just about one player, one team, or one season anymore. It's about how quickly a story can take on a life of its own, and how far it can go before the truth ever catches up. And with that, the conversation doesn't end here. It only resets, waiting for the next clip, the next claim, or the next moment that sends everything spiraling again.